There is a strange moment in life when you realize that not every choice you make is truly yours. You might think you're deciding with reason, that you're being logical, practical, maybe even independent. But if you look closely, you begin to notice something else, a quiet presence beneath every decision, a shadow that whispers from within. Freud believed that what we call free will is often the tip of an iceberg, and that underneath lies a vast ocean of unconscious desires, fears, and forgotten emotions that steer the direction of our lives without us even knowing. The story of why you choose what you choose begins long before you ever learned the word choice. It begins in the invisible theater of your mind, where old emotions replay themselves through the decisions you make today. Before we go deeper, take a quiet breath. You're not alone here. The human mind is complex, but it's also tender, and what Freud discovered was never meant to shame or condemn. It was meant to help us see ourselves more clearly, to understand that every strange decision, every pattern we repeat, carries meaning. If this kind of exploration speaks to you, if you feel there's something inside you that you've never fully understood, I'd love to invite you to subscribe. This channel exists to make these journeys less lonely, to hold space for reflection and discovery, one story at a time. Freud once said that the mind is like an iceberg. Only a small part is visible above the surface, and the rest remains hidden beneath. That hidden part, the unconscious, is not just a dark place full of repressed memories or forbidden desires. It's the emotional memory of who you've been since the beginning. Think of it as the sum of every moment you were loved and every moment you were hurt, every silence you endured, every glance that made you feel safe or unseen. Those impressions, too subtle for words, form the emotional architecture of your being. And it is this hidden architecture that quietly shapes your choices. You don't pick the same kind of partner again and again because you want to. You do it because something deep within you is trying to finish an old story, to finally heal what was left unresolved. Imagine a child who grows up craving attention from a distant parent. They might promise themselves that one day they'll never let anyone treat them that way. But years later, they find themselves drawn, almost magnetically, to people who seem emotionally unavailable. It's not self-sabotage, it's repetition. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to relive what hurt us, hoping this time it will end differently. Each decision, each attraction becomes a silent attempt to rewrite the past. And because this process happens outside awareness, it feels like fate rather than choice. But it isn't fate. It's memory disguised as decision. Some people find this idea terrifying, that the unconscious holds so much power. But there's also a strange kind of hope in it, because once you begin to see your choices not as random, but as meaningful, you can start to understand them, to reclaim them. You start asking questions like, why do I keep saying yes when I want to say no? Why do I stay quiet when I'm angry? Why do I always end up in situations that drain me? Freud would say these are not coincidences. They are the voice of the unconscious, trying to express something through your actions that your conscious mind has not yet allowed itself to speak. Have you ever wondered why certain decisions feel heavy, almost suffocating, while others feel like an exhale? Freud would suggest that the weight you feel is not about the decision itself, but about what it represents. Choosing to walk away from someone might awaken the grief of every goodbye you never processed. Saying no might trigger the guilt you learned as a child for disappointing someone. That's why awareness feels painful at first. It stirs the ghosts that have been sleeping inside you. But pain is not the enemy. It's the beginning of truth. Once you allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding, your choices become clearer, softer, more authentic. You stop reacting and start responding. If you're still with me right now, I'd love to ask you something that might open a quiet door inside you. What is one decision in your life that never made sense? One choice that felt wrong, yet you couldn't stop yourself. Write it in the comments, and if you'd like, copy and paste this line so others can find courage through your story. I didn't understand why I made that choice, but I'm starting to see what it was trying to heal. Your words might help someone realize they're not alone in their confusion. When Freud looked at the unconscious, he didn't see a monster. He saw a misunderstood child carrying too much for too long. He believed that the unconscious reveals itself in slips of the tongue, in dreams, in sudden impulses that feel out of place. You might decide to call someone at midnight, not because it's logical, but because something in you still longs for connection that was once denied. You might refuse a promotion, not because you're afraid of success, but because success unconsciously feels like betrayal, perhaps of a parent who never had that chance. Decisions are not just mental equations. They are emotional negotiations between who you are and who you once needed to be. Every time you make a choice, there are three voices within you speaking at once. The first is the conscious mind, the voice of logic, the one that tries to justify and plan. The second is the preconscious, the thoughts and memories just below awareness, accessible when you reflect. But the third, the unconscious, is deeper. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in symbols, impulses and feelings. It's the part that dreams, that desires, that fears. And often it's the part that decides first. The conscious mind then builds a story around that decision to make it sound reasonable. This is what Freud called rationalization, the elegant lies we tell ourselves to hide truths we're not ready to see. You might say, I chose this job because it's practical, when in truth, you chose it because it made you feel safe, because safety was something your childhood taught you to value above all else. The unconscious is not only about pain, it also holds your creativity, your intuition, your capacity to love. When you ignore it, life feels mechanical. But when you learn to listen, something extraordinary happens. Your decisions begin to align with who you really are, not who you were told to be. Freud's greatest insight wasn't that we're ruled by hidden forces, it was that we can bring those forces to light through self-awareness, and in doing so, we can become freer. He called this process making the unconscious conscious. It's not about analyzing yourself endlessly, but about becoming honest with what you feel, especially the things you wish you didn't feel. Let's continue this journey. In the next part, I'll take you deeper into how these unconscious dynamics shape specific life choices, from love to career to self-sabotage, and how recognizing them changes everything about the way you see yourself. There is a moment, sometimes quiet and almost invisible, when you begin to sense that your life has been repeating itself in circles. Different faces, different settings, yet the same emotional outcome. You tell yourself you've learned, you promise that next time will be different, but somehow you end up in the same emotional place, a little disappointed, a little confused, a little ashamed for not knowing why. Freud would tell you that what you're experiencing is not failure. It's the unconscious trying to complete its unfinished work. Every decision that seems to contradict your logic is the psyche's attempt to heal something left unresolved long ago. It's as if your inner child is still sitting in the same emotional scene, waiting for a different ending, using your adult choices as a stage on which to replay the past. Let's take love as an example, because love is where the unconscious speaks most clearly. When you meet someone new, your conscious mind analyzes the obvious things, how they look, how they speak, what you have in common. But your unconscious is doing something far deeper. It's scanning for emotional familiarity. It's asking, does this person make me feel something I once felt before? That's why, even when you think you're choosing freely, you might find yourself drawn to people who awaken the same old ache. You're not attracted to them by accident. You're trying to master a story that once mastered you. You hope that by repeating the pattern, you'll finally change the ending. But the unconscious doesn't differentiate between healing and reenactment. It simply seeks what it knows. This is why many of our most passionate choices come wrapped in pain. They are our way of speaking the language of the past in the present. Consider someone who was raised by a parent who offered love only when they performed perfectly. That child grows up learning that affection must be earned. As an adult, they may choose partners or bosses who make them prove their worth over and over again. On the surface, it looks like ambition or dedication, but underneath, it's the same emotional contract. Love must be deserved. Freud would say this person is repeating their early experience not because they enjoy suffering, but because their unconscious is trying to rewrite the rules of love, to finally earn it unconditionally. Yet the cruel irony is that until this process becomes conscious, it only deepens the wound. Awareness, therefore, is not a luxury, it's liberation. There is another side to this too, the decisions you don't make, the opportunities you avoid. Sometimes the most revealing choices are the ones we never take. If you've ever felt paralyzed by indecision, caught between desire and fear, you're witnessing an inner conflict between the id, the ego, and the superego, the three parts of Freud's model of the mind. The id is the voice of instinct, wild and hungry, wanting pleasure and satisfaction right now. The superego is the internalized voice of authority, echoing the rules and judgments you absorbed from parents, teachers, and society. And the ego stands between them, trying to mediate, to keep peace, to survive. When you hesitate or second-guess yourself, it's often because these three voices are in negotiation. The ID wants to follow a dream, the superego warns it's too risky or selfish, and the ego is left frozen in the middle, unable to move. The result feels like confusion, but it's actually a psychological stalemate, the mind caught between longing and fear. Freud didn't see this conflict as a flaw. He saw it as the essence of being human. Every decision is a compromise between what we desire and what we've been taught to desire. When those two are aligned, life feels harmonious. When they're not, we experience anxiety, guilt, or shame. That's why sometimes making the right decision feels wrong, because it satisfies the superego but starves the soul. And sometimes what seems irrational feels deeply right, because it allows the id to breathe again. The key is not to silence any part of yourself, but to listen, to understand where each voice comes from and what it truly needs. Think about a time you surprised yourself, when you did something out of character, something spontaneous that felt alive, even if it scared you. That was the unconscious breaking through the surface, reminding you that you're more than your routines and rationalizations. Freud believed that creativity, art, even humor, are ways the unconscious finds expression without censorship. They are the safe disguises through which truth sneaks past the gatekeeper of the ego. That's why people often find clarity after creating something, or why a dream can reveal what months of thinking could not. When you allow expression, you allow integration. The unconscious doesn't want control, it wants recognition. It's easy to think that understanding all this means you'll stop making mistakes, but that's not the goal. Awareness doesn't make you perfect, it makes you real. You'll still choose people who hurt you sometimes. You'll still hesitate, still contradict yourself. The difference is that now you'll know why, and in that knowledge, the compulsion begins to lose its power. You start catching yourself in the act of repeating, and in that moment of awareness, you gain the freedom to choose differently. That's the quiet revolution Freud envisioned. Not a mind free of conflict, but a mind that understands its conflict and lives with it consciously. There's a certain peace in realizing that even your strangest decisions have purpose. The job you took that drained you might have taught you how to say no. The relationship that broke you might have mirrored the wound that needed your attention. The impulse you regretted might have revealed the part of you that still believes it doesn't deserve kindness. Every choice, even the painful ones, is the psyche's way of showing you what still needs healing. And when you begin to listen with compassion rather than judgment, Life stops feeling like a series of mistakes and starts feeling like a conversation between your past and your becoming. So the next time you're about to make a decision, pause. Notice what you feel, not just what you think. Ask yourself whose voice you're hearing: the child who learned to please, the parent who demanded perfection, the dreamer who still believes in possibility. There's wisdom in all of them, but the one that leads you forward is the voice that feels peaceful, not fearful. Freud would say that maturity begins when you stop running from your unconscious and start befriending it. I wonder if you could speak to that younger version of yourself, the one who still influences your choices today. What would you tell them? Write it in the comments, or simply write it for yourself. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is to give words to what has been silent for too long. There is a strange tenderness in realizing that your life has been guided by something invisible, something that has always lived inside you, waiting to be acknowledged. Freud believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That sentence carries both tragedy and hope. Tragedy, because it means so many of us live half asleep, repeating stories we don't remember writing. Hope, because awareness can rewrite them. Once you see that your choices are not random, that your indecisions and compulsions carry meaning, you stop fighting against yourself. You begin to listen, and in that listening, you start to become whole. Every decision you've ever made has been a kind of message, a symbolic act through which your unconscious tried to speak. Even the smallest ones, like staying silent when you wanted to talk, saying yes when your chest screamed no, returning to something that hurt you, are filled with meaning. Freud saw the human being not as a creature of reason, but as a creature of desire, constantly negotiating between love and fear. Most of our decisions are attempts to find a balance between the two. When love leads, we move toward growth. When fear leads, we protect ourselves, even if that means staying small. Neither is wrong. Both are strategies of survival. The key is to know which one is speaking in each moment. You can begin to observe this by noticing your emotional reactions before logic steps in. The next time you face a choice, pay attention to the first thing you feel in your body: a tightening in the stomach, a rush of warmth, a sudden hesitation. These are not random sensations. They are the language of the unconscious, older than words. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Freud's later followers would expand on this, showing that trauma is stored in the body, shaping not only how we think, but how we choose. So often, what we call intuition is actually emotional memory whispering through the body. Listening to it doesn't mean obeying every impulse, but it does mean honoring what it's trying to show you. Freud also believed that the unconscious is not simply a repository of wounds, but a reservoir of energy. When we repress emotions, that energy doesn't disappear. It redirects. Sometimes it becomes anxiety, sometimes creativity, sometimes strange decisions that seem to make no sense until you look closer. A person who constantly changes jobs might seem restless, but underneath, they might be searching for a lost sense of freedom they once had to give up. Someone who avoids intimacy might not be cold, but rather protecting a part of themselves that was once too exposed. When we finally understand this, compassion replaces judgment. We begin to see ourselves and others not as irrational, but as trying, always trying, to find a way back to balance. And yet, Freud also warned of the resistance that comes with awareness. The closer we get to truth, the more the mind defends itself. You might notice that when you start reflecting on a painful pattern, you suddenly feel sleepy, distracted, or impatient. That's not coincidence. That's resistance. The ego's way of saying, "Not yet, this is too much." Freud often compared the mind to a city built upon ancient ruins. Beneath every new layer of life, there are older structures, forgotten, but still standing. You can't demolish them overnight. You have to uncover them carefully, piece by piece, with patience. That's why personal growth is slow. The unconscious doesn't yield to force, it opens to understanding. What happens then when we begin to live consciously? Our decisions start to align with truth, not repetition. You stop choosing out of guilt or fear. You begin to ask, what do I really want? And listen for an answer that feels authentic, even if it scares you. Because truth is often frightening at first. It threatens the familiar. But what's familiar isn't always what's right. Freud taught that the mind prefers the known pain over the unknown possibility. Awareness flips that balance. It teaches you to trust that peace, not pain, can be your new normal. There's also a certain humility that comes with understanding the unconscious. You realize that no one, not even yourself, is fully transparent. Everyone carries hidden motives, unseen fears, unspoken desires. This awareness softens judgment. You stop needing others to be perfect because you know how hard it is to live with your own contradictions. You begin to forgive, not because what happened was okay, but because you see that behind every wound, there was once a person trying to survive with the tools they had. Freud never said forgiveness was easy. He simply implied that understanding is the first step toward it. Perhaps the greatest freedom in Freud's ideas is this, that insight alone can change the future. The moment you realize that a certain decision came not from your true self, but from an old wound, you gain the ability to choose differently next time. That's what therapy, reflection, or even deep self-awareness can offer. Not erasing the past, but transforming your relationship with it. You can't rewrite your childhood, but you can stop reliving it. You can start to live as the adult who finally protects the child within you, instead of repeating the pain that shaped them. And so the question remains, how do you live with your unconscious rather than against it? Freud would say it begins with honesty, with sitting quietly in your own company without distractions and noticing what comes up. The boredom, the longing, the sadness. Those feelings are the entrance to your inner world. You don't have to analyze them, you just have to let them exist. Over time, they start to speak. You begin to see patterns, the people you attract, the roles you play, the choices that seem to choose you. And with every recognition, a bit more light enters the dark. Maybe that's what Freud meant when he said, "Where it was, their ego shall be." It's not about control, but about illumination. It's about letting consciousness expand into places it's never reached before. The unconscious doesn't vanish, it becomes known. And in that knowing, life feels less like chaos and more like meaning unfolding. You still make mistakes, but now they're part of growth, not repetition. You still feel fear, but it no longer rules you. You start to see your life not as a series of disconnected events, but as a dialogue between your inner world and the outer one. So if you've ever wondered why you do what you do, if you've ever felt torn between what you think and what you feel, know this: you're not broken, you're human. You're living the same psychological drama that connects every one of us, the dance between consciousness and the unconscious. Your decisions, even the ones you regret, are proof that you are still reaching for something. Love, safety, understanding. The fact that you're questioning them now means you're already waking up. You're already seeing what you weren't seeing. Before we close, I want to invite you to reflect on this. What if your next decision didn't come from fear, guilt, or habit, but from awareness? What if you chose with tenderness for the person you've been and hope for the person you're becoming? That's how healing begins, one conscious choice at a time. If this reflection resonated with you, I'd love for you to stay connected. Subscribe so we can keep walking through these inner landscapes together. Every week, we uncover another layer of the mind, not to judge, but to understand. And if you feel like sharing your thoughts, I invite you to write in the comments, "I'm learning to see what I wasn't seeing." Maybe that simple sentence will remind someone else that clarity is possible, even after years of confusion. In the end, that's what Freud offered us, not an instruction manual, but a mirror. He showed us that the unconscious isn't the enemy. It's the part of you that has always been trying to tell the truth, even when words failed. And when you finally learn to listen, your decisions begin to make sense. You stop chasing certainty and start embracing awareness. You begin to see that behind every choice, there's a story. And that story, your story, it is still being written, one honest moment at a time.